Thank you very much. So I've tried to follow Professor Edenhofer's speech, although I don't speak German, so I don't pretend that I understood everything. But I think my presentation will try to give you the international picture and come a bit out of Europe and see what's happening in this, as you mentioned, climate and energy crisis. I'll try to share my screen. I think you can see it now. So we have been hearing very clearly, news have been very much focusing on high gas prices, the risk of interruption, whether we'll be able to keep our lights on and heating on this winter. I would like to take the light onto something that we are not talking much about, which is the amount of money that governments have been putting and are putting into clean energy as a result of COVID in 2021, but more recently as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And what you can see there is that currently governments around the world have put on the table something close to 1.1 trillion euros just for clean energy. This spans renewables, electric vehicles, grids, hydrogen, and a host of other clean energy technologies. This number, to give you a sense of scale, is twice as much as what government had put forward just after the global financial crisis. We are seeing an unprecedented push, government push on clean energy, coupled with an incredibly low cost of clean energy around the world. This, for us at the IEA, means that if we don't get our steps wrong, we are really in the cusp of a decade of clean energy revolution. If you look at that 1.1 trillion, Europe accounts for around a third of the money put on the table. Another third is the US, and this, I would like to underline, is really unprecedented. The Biden administration managed to pass in August this Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, it was a different scale than what was originally planned, but in our assessment and that of many others, this is going to really accelerate the transatlantic clean energy transition, giving also space for and room for more gas to be exported to the EU and pushing together with Europe and many other countries in the world clean energy deployment down. Just to give you one example, but really treat it as such, I'm showing here what we are expecting now for electric vehicles. By 2030, we are expecting globally 1 vehicle in 3 sold to be electric. But if we focus on the 3 largest markets in the planet, the United States, China, and the EU, by 2030, we would be seeing 1 vehicle in 2 sold by 2030 being electric. So, as I mentioned, EV is one of the several clean energy technologies for which we are expecting a very significant acceleration taking forward this decade. Together with the acceleration of clean energy deployment and investment, we have also been tracking this more recently, what's happening to jobs in the energy sector. So up until a few years ago, it was clearly the oil and gas industry that was with coal, which was leading the expansion in clean energy jobs. This trend has changed, and in 2020, with the COVID crisis, the number of jobs in energy fell quite significantly. But with the tracking we are making, we are seeing 2022 already being above employment in the energy sector, above pre-COVID level. Why? Simply because over these past 3 years, clean energy has expanded and is expanded in a very consistent manner. Renewables have continued to expand. EV, you have just seen, have continued to expand. And this has led to new jobs globally. And seeing this picture that you see by region there, I would like to draw the attention to the fact that basically all regions in the planet already have either at par or more people working in clean energy than fossil fuels, except 2, Russia and the Middle East. With the expected growth that we are seeing through this decade in terms of clean energy, we are expecting also the jobs in the clean energy part to grow quite strongly. Are there fault lines to be watching over the next decade? For us, there are, and there are some that should be watched really now as we enter into COP that was just mentioned a minute ago. So if you look at global investment, and now investment are distributed across oil and gas and clean energy, we are seeing oil and gas investment being also for 2022 being more or less on track with what you would be expecting for a global net zero scenario by 2030. But we still need to see a big acceleration in clean energy and infrastructure investment. Now, we are quite optimistic given the amount that government spending put on the table by advanced economies, that advanced economies will see a very significant acceleration. What we are not seeing, however, is this happening in emerging economies. Emerging economies' trend in clean energy investment over the past couple of years has been pretty stable. It's really a fraction of what we would be expecting if we were to meet our global climate goals. So I would like to conclude with a key word that we are putting back on the table, which is trust. Even if it's true that the upcoming COP is a technical one, we are worried about what we are seeing when talking with emerging economies. While in Europe is broadly understood that the current crisis is due to gas prices, and in fact, beyond that, it's been a voluntary restriction of gas supplies to Europe already happening from Russia back in September 2021, and then the price skyrocketed after Russia invaded Ukraine, and we are now in what we called a really instability of prices. While this is understood in most quarters in Europe, this is not the case that this narrative is exactly the same what we hear in emerging economies. In emerging economies, the narrative is more patchy, is less clear. In some cases, it's the clean energy transition. In some cases, it's European behavior that is being pointed to. And in some cases, what we hear is that double standards apply to Europe and other parts of the world. So going into this COP, for us, we are really talking very deeply with the number of countries, in particular African countries, given this is being hosted in Egypt, because we see we know the many jobs Europe has to do today to ensure gas supplies, to ensure electricity supplies. There is one other critical job, which is the re-establishment of trust and the re-establishment of a right narrative in emerging economies of what's happening in the global energy market. One final thought for all of us, before turning the floor to Andrea, is Africa. The position of Africa vis-a-vis natural gas and how they're coming towards this COP is very confrontational, and in particular is very clearly saying that they're being applied two standards for advanced and emerging economies. Our latest analysis, the Africa Energy Outlook, which we released a couple of months ago, actually shows that natural gas is needed for African development, even if we are to meet a 1.5 degree target. This is compatible with meeting a 1.5 degree target. Africa accounted, all know, for 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It has now gas discoveries that are around 5 TCM. We think that some of those gas discoveries will be needed for Africa's own development, for fertilizers, for steel and cement, and to desalinate water. And we hope that there is going to be a constructive discussion with African partners on this topic at COP, together with a clear narrative about what's happening in the global energy market. If Africa was, which is of course not possible, burn all the 5 TCM that has discovered up to today, its share in global emissions would grow from 3 to 3.5%. All in all, the message from the IEA is that we will be facing a difficult winter, probably a couple more difficult winters ahead, but the direction in front of us is clear, pushing clean energy transition, and spring will be looming soon. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so very much. You have been talking about trust First question is, do you trust, from a global perspective, do you trust the states that they will stick to climate neutrality?
I think that the pledges that have been made vary. Some of the countries have been very reticent in giving ambitious targets, and I think that they'll actually get to climate neutrality earlier than they have stated. And some others have put very ambitious targets and may reach climate neutrality a bit later. All in all, I think if we put all the pledges on the table that we've seen in Glasgow, globally, with some plus and minuses, I think we are going to be meeting what the Glasgow Pact is. And it's not a 1.5 degree.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Is not Glasgow by itself will not lead us to a temperature below 1.5 degree.
Second question, do you think that the current energy crisis or crises will still, or maybe even foster the way to climate neutrality, or make it more unlikely? So what is the input of the crises that we are facing in the moment for climate neutrality in 2050?
We are currently seeing two clear, distinct reactions. One from advanced economies that are actually increasing and accelerating their push for clean energy transition. I think that the trust here comes into play. Emerging markets are wary of what's happening, and I think putting the narrative right for them is going to be critical. As Otmar mentioned earlier, we are seeing a new investment wave in coal, and this is clearly worrying. So I think we need to transform this COP from a technical COP into a COP that recreates trust and puts the narrative right.
And would you follow Ottmar Edenhofer in saying that we need new formats? So what do we need? We have the Klimaclub, we know about that in Germany, how far it got or not. So what do we need precisely beyond the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh to really foster the topic and make major steps forward?
So I think accelerating action from the G20 countries that account for basically 80% of global emissions is going to be critical. So any vehicle that will accelerate action of the G20 and any sectoral initiative that puts those sectors that are harder to abate, that are a bit more behind in the transition, to push forward more quickly will be welcome. And I think that there are many that are happening, including the Climate Club, and we are very well aware of what's happening and certainly support it.
Laura Cozzi, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Big thanks to you.